Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast, episode 187. Today we are talking finding a viable development site. I have got Bob Andersen as my guest. Well, it's probably both of our podcasts, but we're going to jump on in. Going to be a great episode. Let's hear about finding a viable development site. Hello. Episode 187. Crikey, we're cranking through, Bob.
Oh, it'll be 200 before you know it.
It will be 200. Now, you're going to bring your mouth closer to that mic or bring your mic.
I'll bring the mic closer to my mouth.
That's a good idea. It's a constant battle with you, that microphone. Okay, so giving away a copy of Property Millionaires Exposed. We never really tell why. Bob wrote a chapter in this book, so and it talks about all the different property strategies that there are, or property making money through property strategies, and his is on property development. Other people have got their jam, why they think it's great. But this week, and we give away one most weeks, this week it goes to Derek Zanje, Zhanje. I'm so sorry, Derek, I don't know how to say it. But anyway, this is in the post to you. I hope you enjoy it. So, Bob.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
You should thank me.
I should thank you.
You should.
It's your podcast, Hilary. Take it away.
Well, it's actually both of ours now. We changed it.
Yeah.
My question to you is, what's your tip for the week?
Oh, based on what's happening in the last few hours, property settlements never happen on time. Well, they do, but rarely. And so, sure enough, we thought we had everything set, and not quite, nearly there.
Yep.
Need a little extension, just a little bit.
Yep.
And we've got it. So, yeah, I guess do everything right, be patient. Sometimes they settle on time. Often they don't.
What would be the percentage, while we're on that, of settlements happening when they're supposed to versus getting extensions? What, in your experience, 40 years of developing, Bob, what would be that?
Yeah, well, development sites can be a little bit more complex. So there's a few last-minute things that can happen, but look, a majority do settle, I think, on time, but it could be 30%.
Don't
settle on time.
Wow, that's a big number.
Yeah. It's nothing to have a settlement. Sometimes it's only a day, you got a settlement set, 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and you only need almost nothing to happen and it gets pushed to the next day.
I actually know that because I've purchased so many properties in my time. 23 renovations, that means, an awful lot of properties have been purchased.
And sold.
And sold. So I know that it's always, I don't know why, it's always a Friday. Is that intentional?
Imagine a 4 p.m. settlement on Friday. There's almost no chance of it happening.
That's pretty much all I've ever had. I'm sure there's a thing. That must be a New Zealand thing because most of mine have been over there, less over here. A few though. So around 30% don't settle. That's a big number.
On time, not don't settle, but maybe on the day, on the time, yeah.
So today we're talking about finding a viable development site, and we really want people to understand that there is a right site and there is a wrong site, and done well, you can make money, and done not well, you can not make money. I think, firstly, I want you to point out the number of people that have even joined our mentoring program and had come to the program with a site already. What percentage would that be, Bob, of which doesn't work? Because
well, not a lot of people join our mentoring program with a site because we try and encourage them not to, because but of those that come to us with the site already in hand, I'd say 25% of them have problems. The question is, can those problems be overcome and fixed? And sometimes they can't, sadly. But, yeah. So
what are I think the most common mistakes are people not... Well, I'm going to give my opinion first, and because yours is going to be a better opinion than mine based on way more experience than me. But I'm thinking it's mostly around, we can throw the words out, not having the numbers right, but there's more to it than that. It's either over extending the number they think something might sell for, or under, not putting enough in for build costs, or they're just paying too much for the site because they've got emotional. So we know that, property development, there's no emotion involved.
That's what I love about it.
Oh, yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that we're emotionless.
No, not at all.
But I'm watching the podcast today on YouTube. It's a new format. Bob and I are facing each other. And it's a weird format because we're really close to each other, looking at each other. But
wow.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, I've got a better view than you have.
Well, there you go. So,
Yeah.
I believe it's when you say when we throw out, and the thing with property development, I believe, is that people just use common, what's the word I'm after, like slang sayings, like they say, crunch the numbers. There's more to crunching numbers than using the word crunch the numbers. What does that actually mean? It means putting the numbers in and calculating them correctly. And that's not just adding up and taking away. There's also things like timelines. When you're paying interest, there's a timeline, and so it changes all the way through. So yeah, I think there are so many words thrown around and people take them too lightly.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think that's one of the problems. I think the other one is the big numbers they're not correct on those. This is just from, me and my experience in working here. And then the last one, probably around, I'd say at the moment, I'd say it's probably just maybe missing a little bit of due diligence, stuff they don't know that they don't know.
That's it. Until you know, you don't know what you don't know. And look, that's what I found. I've seen plenty of sites that should never be bought that have been bought. Not just by people who might end up in our program and arrive with a site that isn't a good site, but just just generally out there, and for lots of reasons. But yeah, it'll be around the numbers for sure. It's like everything. If you don't know, what do you know? So they leave costs out. What I find there's a lot of like costs in property development that people don't know them all, and they leave them out. Well, that's going to make it look better than it is. Or like you said, they get a bit emotional, maybe about the sale price. Well, that'll make it look better than it is.
Well, they really want it. They really want to do a development. They've been looking for too long, or they feel they're impatient.
Yeah. And
they fudge them.
Yeah. But it's all back to the numbers. And then there's other things that relate. Like I've seen people, I can remember one person I met once bought a site that had a complete flood overlay and you can't develop it. I've seen that a couple of times. They bought sites that cannot be developed. And that's one example. And due diligence, they've bought sites with a sewer main through the middle, thinking you can build over it, and you can't always do that. Like there's just so many things I've seen over the years.
I think that's a good point, Bob. Well, you just said you can't always, because they maybe ask their friend or a consultant who has had an experience that they could, or somebody could, or their mate or their neighbour or their cousin or their dog or whoever has said, oh no, you can build over those because they knew somebody else that could. So you think it's a rule of thumb, and it's actually not a rule of thumb.
It could have been in another council. It's got totally different rules. It could have been that previously you could, now councils changed the rules. And things like trees. I've seen trees kill deals where people thought, "Oh, I'll cut the tree down," and you can't.
So you see those as the biggest things. What's been the best example of somebody doing what they should to get a viable site that everything went well, and there's one that comes to your head. Let's go one of yours and then somebody that's gone through, mate, that we've worked with in the mentoring program. But what's been your best site? You did everything right. It was viable. All the numbers worked. Everything worked, and it came off and it paid well. What was that one for you?
I think one we're doing at the moment. I was talking to somebody about that today. We're talking about problems you can have with a development. I was saying, well, look, councils, that's getting your development permit. It's something you don't have a lot of control over in terms of councils' attitude, because some councils can be anti-development, and you're better off keeping away from them. Some councils are pro-development. I'd rather go there. And so councils can be an issue, as we know. And also, we're talking about builders. Most builders are good. But you don't want a bad one. And that can make your life a misery as well. So I've had examples, on projects where councils made my life a misery. I've had examples where
I know
I've chosen the wrong builder a couple of times, and that's made my life a misery. But then when you've got a good builder, life's a joy. When you've got a good council, life's a joy. And I think, you're saying a good one. I think at the moment, the duplex development, it's good. I mean, we had very specific requirements when we went looking for it. We had a location. We even narrowed it down to a street that we wanted to do it, and we found a property. I love corner blocks for duplexes, although it doesn't have to be. It ended up a corner block. We went to auction, but ended up winning, and we only paid $5,000 more than what our limit was, and that's nothing.
That you said that was your limit. You just didn't tell us that. Wasn't that the truth or not?
Probably.
No, I thought that's what you said afterwards.
Yeah.
I already was going to go up an extra 5,000. That was my number.
Yeah. It went really well with council. We got a fast approval. That was good. So one of those issues that can be a bit of a pain, councils went really well. We used a builder that we had history with and we really like and we know does a great job. His price is good, the quality of his work's good. He's very good at communicating. And once again, the build went well. Was on, and then the marketing is going well. So that's an example of like things going really well all the way through.
Would that be, in your 40 years, would that be one of the best you've had?
Certainly up there. Yeah. Because of those things, I mean, as you know, I've had problems with councils. I've had projects where I've had to go to court, spend a lot of money, win, but, you spend a lot of money. I've had problems with builders a couple of times. I've chosen the wrong builder. They're forever gouging, trying to get more money out of you, those sorts of things, we all make mistakes, but we learn from them. Most of the builders I've worked with have been good. Some have been excellent. A couple of ones I made a mistake with and regretted it, but you get through. And you asked the question of, an example of something where everything seemed to go right, and I think that current one's a good one.
So I think the takeaway, what I'm hearing is you had a criteria and all of it was met.
Yeah.
You wanted, there was a list of things which was what you wanted.
All the way down to the street.
Yep, all the way down to the street. But the builder that you wanted.
A council that we know is reasonably good.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I mean, we had to do the right things along the way, make sure we had the right design, that it suited the market, all those things that you normally do. But as far as something that flowed...
Just on that, I'm on the fence about those bathroom basins. Always have been since day one. I look at them and think, I don't know if I would have put those in there, but people like them. One sold in 20 minutes, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, so that's a good example of things flowing well, and you'd love every project to be like that, but yeah. So
what about if you can think of a project that you've had that? Let's talk about where you actually made a mistake. So, oh gosh, Bob made a mistake. Let's go back, maybe back in your early days, because I can think of one when you didn't know about the downturn and when you didn't understand the whole system of property development. And
that was sort of fairly early in the piece.
We're talking like a long time ago.
I'm talking about a long time ago. Yeah. Well, I was young and naive. You've got to remember that when I started property development, you couldn't learn how to be a property developer. And I made up my mind I wanted to be one. And then I thought, well, how do I become one? There was no courses at TAFE. There was none at uni. There's just no courses on property development.
There's no one teaching it.
No one teaching it. No
Facebook.
No, the only way you could do is have a crack at it. And so I had to look at what other developers were doing and try and work out what they were doing, like almost reverse engineer a project and make sense of it. And that's not the best way. I mean, these days there's books, there's programs,
courses, there's the answers are there.
People that can mentor, everything's there today. No excuse for not being able to learn properly. But back in those days, no, it wasn't the case. And so early in the piece, and I started at a time when the market was moving along pretty well. I did really well out of my first project. I did well out of my second, and moving in.
By now you're thinking, I'm the man.
Well, no, I did. And
you did. You were the man.
Here I am, like in my 20s. I thought, started to get a bit arrogant.
Oh, I wish I knew 20-year-old.
How long's this been going on? And
the secret sauce to life.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, I'm making this really good money. I've done 2 projects, done really well. I mean, like serious money, good money. And I thought, this will go on forever. I'll be retired by the time I'm 30.
What's the property development like? Why isn't everyone doing it?
Yeah. What I didn't understand, and I mean, it sounds stupid to people these days because there's so much education out there that, like, you can't believe how there was zero back then.
There wasn't even computers, was there? I mean, there was
not when I started, no.
Most people are thinking, what?
Certainly not.
There was a time there was no computers.
There was no personal computers.
No.
There was big organisations had computers that were probably the size of 10 cars or something, or a bus. I didn't realise that the property market rose and corrected and In other words, the market cycles and that sort of thing, And so I developed when the market was not booming, but like going along, steadily going up. Things were relatively easy, and I made money. And then I did a second one and made money, and I did a third one, and the market,
like many of the current property
dipped.
educators.
Well, it dipped. I was doing a subdivision, and the market this is on the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
So and particularly going back, decades ago, like this is like 40 years ago. The Gold Coast was really hot and cold. It'd boom and then it bust, and it'd boom and then it bust. These days, it still is a little bit of a hairy ride, but it's a lot better. It's a lot more stable. Yeah. You don't have the big highs and the big lows back, that it had back then. And here I am developing on the Gold Coast, thinking how smart I was, and I just keep making lots of money, and it didn't work that way. And then the sale prices dropped, and next thing I've got land that I can't sell.
So you've done a subdivision, hey? And how many sites did you have?
Oh, that was like a 7-lot subdivision, which is not big, but like all my money was in it. Oh, a lot of it was in.
Well, just think, people that are in our community now, that's pretty stock standard. You're doing a 7-lot subdivision, and so that the market dropped, and what were you holding? What was the problem?
Well, first of all, and this is before like computerized titles. Getting titles out of what's called the titles office was always slow, but it became extremely slow. And I think there was a lot going through.
Maybe there was an early COVID.
I think there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of products going through, which caused an oversupply, which meant prices dropped. But also everything was slow. It took me ages to get the titles. So I've got interest chewing its head off. Still don't have any titles. And by the time I had titles, the market was really soft. And people weren't buying vacant blocks of land. They only wanted to buy houses, or at least a house and land package, but mainly houses. And prices had dropped.
Can I ask a question there, Bob? Had you read the market wrong?
I didn't read the market. I didn't know you had to read the market.
No, but not as I'm meaning, like you were selling land and people wanted houses. Had you also
that sort of switched?
Oh, okay, because of the downturn.
I don't know, but like vacant blocks of land. I think there's a lot of vacant blocks of land.
Right,
out there,
oversupply.
And so I had to. I had to work my way through that.
How did you do that? How did you work your way through?
Well, I used the last bit of. I had a house. I had like equity in my house, but I put all my cash into the development, and I bought a business. I bought a business that I knew I could build up really quickly because I needed more income. You see, back in these days, like this was like pay the interest as you go. It wasn't a capitalised interest loan back then. It was with a bank. And so I had to pay the interest every month, no matter what, out of my own money. And so I had to get more money. And so I bought a business that I built up really fast. And I was using all the income out of that to pay the loan off.
Are you married with children at this stage?
I'm married with almost a child, but not quite.
Oh, my goodness. That would have been so stressful.
Yeah, and that business made good money, but the bank just sucked out the money as quick as I could make it. But it kept me alive. It kept me floating.
How long for? How long did you have to float for?
15 months probably.
Right.
And I hooked up with a builder, and I started to build houses on the land, and basically put my land up. He put the house up. We went halves in the build, and worked my way through by putting houses on the blocks of land that the people didn't want, but they were okay to buy the house at the other end. I broke even on that project. I broke even on a couple of projects in my life, but it was a hard way to break even.
Yeah, for sure.
I had to work myself really hard. I had the business. I had to work hard, build up, get the money to give to the bank, basically, and for that period of time, and work my way through, which is building houses, selling houses, which I did a joint venture with a builder on my land to do that. And but I got there. I got through. Damn near kill me. There's a few restless nights there, I can tell you,
I think that's a property development thing. There's always a few restless nights. Even this afternoon, before we got notification of the extension for this week, there was, you said, you know what could happen here, and you pointed out the worst case scenario, and I'm just sitting there thinking, I don't want to hear that. I do not want to hear because I think you're thinking, I'm sure they'll be okay. They'll give us the extension. But when you said, well, that costs, and it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm just freaking out on the inside. But I don't know why you said it. I don't know whether it was just to scare me or not. But
probably, yeah.
Probably. But yeah, okay. There are sleepless nights sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially
occasionally.
Yeah. So that's really about you not understanding the market.
Oh, I didn't have a clue.
So we're looking at...
It's back to you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about market cycles, how things can change. I just thought properties always just kept going up, which is pretty stupid. People would laugh at that these days. They'd say, what an idiot. But you've got to remember there's no education out there.
But there are still people doing that now on occasion.
Well, yeah. I mean, these days I see people make mistakes and get into trouble, but there's no excuse for that these days. At least back then, there's no way of learning. It was, trial and error.
So what about, that's sort of, that's really around financials, isn't it? So what about, other key reasons for finding a great site? What about...
You know what? Understanding what you want before you head out there. Like that example I gave.
Yep.
I knew the type of project we wanted to do.
The good example.
Which was a duplex.
Yep.
I knew the location right down to the street. And also because we'd understand the market, we knew who we were building for, what their expectations were. So we got the design right. We got the standard of finishes right. And what made it extra good was a quick approval and later on a quick sale. And a good builder whom we already knew anyway. But back to the beginning of it, I knew we knew what we wanted and we knew where we wanted.
So that's one of the major things, the market and the location. What about, Bob, another major important thing for finding a viable site is zoning and council regulations, understanding that. And even, I suppose, we could break that down to the project you're saying that went well. There are some zoning regulations there's a couple of 3 days that you wouldn't know if somebody else had a DA in lodged, and that could affect what we were doing.
Yeah, well, zoning dictates that. So that's the zoning in the planning scheme, which for those that aren't really familiar with zonings, it tells you what you can do and what you can't do on blocks of land that have a particular zoning. So there's residential zonings, and there's a number of those. There's zonings where you can only build a house. There's zonings where you can build townhouses. There's zonings where you can build 5-story apartments. There's all sorts of zonings just in the residential. And then beyond that, there's zonings for industrial, but then there's a whole range of different types of industrial zonings as well. So zonings are important. But that comes back to knowing what you want to do. Like if you want to say, I wanted to do a 3 or 4 townhouse site, well, you have to go to a zoning that's suitable for townhouses, obviously. And so zoning is important. In the example we were talking about, it is a zoning, but it's also got to do with the size of the lot. The lot has to be over a certain size in a certain zoning. So it's not just the zoning. Now we're talking about lot sizes. And as you know, in that particular area, the council won't let you do 2 duplexes in a row side by side. So if you're looking at a site, you have to look at each side of you to see, first of all, is there a duplex there? And if there is, well, you can't. But also, does somebody have a development permit, either approved or even in council?
How do you find out because there is that period of time that you can't be 100% sure there, isn't there? Like a day or two. Yeah,
so the council that we're talking about where we did the duplex is a very good council. So you can go to the council website and you can see if anybody has an application on the adjoining lots to you.
Oh, yeah.
If someone, for instance, had a development permit in council next to you,
it's game over.
Don't buy it. Yeah. But I guess, there is this little bit of time between you lodging yours and maybe a neighbour lodging theirs who hasn't lodged it, but, when you sign a contract, but lodges it before you lodge yours.
Sitting on the person's desk or whatever that is within minutes.
It's a short time frame where that you can't control or check.
That's weird that you can't actually check. So that's...
but you could talk to the neighbours too.
And another thing with that, there's the conversations, or even when we talk about knowing your patch, because it's all about knowing what's going on in your patch. Sometimes the council is a little bit relaxed about things, and then all of a sudden and so they let a few things go, and then all of a sudden they get a bit pedantic. And we had that happen in that patch, didn't we? They decided that they were going to get a bit tight on the square metre rate, or was it the upstairs build or something? There was something went on there. What was that?
So the backstory to having that, like, as you know, that development permit went through quickly. But we worked on about 3 duplexes prior. And council had not long ago allowed duplexes to be built in those suburbs. There's about 3 suburbs that we're looking at on a certain size block of land, and that was a bit new for them. Previously, they'd only allow them on a larger site, but then they were allowing them on a smaller site. And what they were finding is that council was still finding their way with it, and so they chop and change a bit, and that's what happened. The first one we did, you might remember, we had to change the plans twice. And for instance, duplex. At one point, council wanted you, if you did a duplex, to have you couldn't have a common driveway. You had to have 2 separate driveways. And later on, they said, "Oh no, you can have a common driveway." And then you're allowed to have a certain amount of square metres on the bottom level as a percentage of your site area, and a certain amount of square metres upstairs. And then we designed it like that. And then
they changed their mind.
Just as we were lodging it, they said, "Oh, we've changed it. Now we're going this way." Then we had to go back and change. Now that cost us time and money because we had to get the architect then to redesign it. And so what they were doing, they were still sort of finding their feet on this whole new concept that they'd allowed to be approved, and chopping and changing. And sometimes they changed it, then they went back to what they had before they changed it. So that was a frustrating period. The first one in particular and the second one, they were still doing a bit of chopping and changing. By the time we did the third one, they knew exactly what they wanted. We did exactly what they wanted, and therefore it went through quickly.
Right. So the takeaway for somebody who, as a takeaway around that, would that be just having someone on the inside or just being on top of what's going on? How can you mitigate those issues?
We used a good town planner.
Yep.
And we used a really good architect.
Right.
So we spend quite a lot of time researching who the main architects were that were doing that product in that area, and who the main town planners were. And it was obvious that there was 2 architects that were doing probably 70% of all that work, and there was one town planner in particular was probably doing 60% of all that work. And so we went with one of the architects and that town planner. So we chose them for particular reasons. And they did everything right, but it was council chopping and changing.
And I suppose I'll go back to the takeaway for the first one where you were talking about demand and location. And the takeaway for people there when it comes to finding a viable site is that's just know your market. Know what's selling there, know what people are looking for.
Yeah.
That's talking to real estate agents, understanding what they want, what the people are asking for, and just building that.
And going to open homes and seeing what other developers are doing.
Yeah.
It's great. I reckon it's great. You've chosen an area and you think, okay, I'm going to do a duplex, I'm going to do a little townhouse development, whatever it is. Maybe you're going to subdivide a lot into 2 lots and build 2 houses, whatever it is you want to do in that area. Anything that's open for inspection. What's great, so say you're looking at a duplex. Well, a developer may have spent $2.5 or $3 million or whatever it is building that duplex, and you have the opportunity to go and have a look at it, to go through it, to critique it, to ask the agent about it and what they like about it or don't like about it, without spending any money. So the other developer spent $3 million on it. Hopefully he got it right for his sake, but you can go and look at it for free, and you can learn by doing that. That's just something you do. Get to understand the agents, like all that sort of thing. You got to know local agents. You got to understand what the market wants.
You know what? You brought up something really good there. You said, look at what's been done. So if something's sitting on the market for too long, you need to ask the agent why.
Particularly if other things around it are selling.
Yeah. Because I do know of a place, and you know the one too, because we went and
looked at it recently.
And they think we're going to buy it. I'm like, I don't want to give you my name. I do not want to give you. I don't want you ringing me up. I do not want this house. But it was
a very expensive product.
Very expensive and very big and beautiful. Just too unusual. They just made it too unusual.
Yeah, it
so someone
was.
buying that, that's a very specific person rather than more people are going to want that. So produce something that more people, not something that's very nichey that not many would want.
If you found the one person that loved that, they would jump on it.
For sure.
They wouldn't argue about the price and they'd love it. But most people wouldn't want it. And that's what was happening. You know,
it was cool. Like I walked through, I was like, "Wow, what a cool place!"
It was out there, but it wasn't everybody's cup of tea.
There was a lot going on. There was a lot of colour and just a lot, but parts of it were beautiful, and other parts were not so
exciting and interesting. But
you wouldn't want to live there.
Not too many people would want it.
Well, they can't have. It's been on the market for a long time. So that's the other thing. When finding a viable site, if something's not selling, look at why. And that's just an obvious example that it was too extreme.
And that's part of getting to understand your market.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand your market quite early. You might know the product that you want to build, and that therefore you know the zoning to look for. And fairly early in the piece, you're going to have to decide on your design. Well, that's very much to do with, well, who's going to buy it? What's my target market? And very often you can narrow that down as to who that market might be and what they want, and give them what they want.
Which leads me to the next one when finding a viable site, when looking at what a market wants, looking at transport links, utilities and access. So... And I know we say, I feel like some of the stuff that we repeat, but we repeat it in different places and people are like, oh, yeah, okay, now it makes sense. But when looking, like we didn't really have to worry about infrastructure and amenities where that was because everyone has their own car, basically, as long as there's a supermarket nearby and all that business.
Yeah.
And they're upgrading the airport, which is really useful. But when you perhaps look at, you're in a city or there's people without cars, or you're near a university, you've got students, or maybe you're looking into rooming housing or whatever it is that you're going to build, that's when it really matters. It really matters that people can walk to get their groceries, that they can walk to the train station, that they can walk to the bus station, or they can walk to wherever they need to. And that's really, it's so vital.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes into it. I mean, the duplex we've been talking about, it was more dictated by its proximity to the beach because it was a coastal development and we chose a particular street near the beach. But I've built lots of townhouses and apartments, but way more townhouses than apartments. And in capital cities. And I have built a lot for the investment market as well. I mean, at the moment, we probably tend to build more for owner-occupiers. But I've built a lot in my life for investors, for instance. And so you ask yourself, well, what do investors, what's investment? What's a good place to develop a project that you're going to sell to investors, for instance? And what are they looking for? Well, transport's a big one. Proximity to, like you say, shopping centres. I'm thinking of a couple
schools.
Schools, to some extent, and particularly good schools.
Yeah.
Even coffee precincts, that's sort of,
Well, it's like my number one.
It
was my number two, actually.
Not just big Westfields,
but
that nice village sort of atmosphere, that sort of thing, That's lifestyle, it's amenity. And so when I was doing a lot of investment, transport was a big thing, particularly in a city where transport can be a real problem. And so I can remember one development I did, it really ticked a lot of boxes. It was 150 metres to a railway station and it was 3 stops to the city. It was 200 metres to a bus stop and a fairly quick drive into the city. So I've got buses and trains within 200 metres into one end and the other end. A big Westfield, about a 3-minute drive, that's pretty good. And you could actually catch a train to it if you wanted to, and a bus, or 3-5 minute drive. And also within 200 metres was the biggest private hospital in the state, private hospital. So that employs a lot of people, and there it was. So fantastic transport, shops, good cafe precincts. It was fairly close into the city. It had everything, and went really well.
So that's infrastructure.
Tick lots of boxes.
Yeah. And you know what I'm hearing? We haven't even got to this yet. I'm hearing product. Like everything we've talked about, location and market demand comes down to product. Zoning and council regulation, it does affect the product. and infrastructure and amenities is a lot around product, which is around demand. And
they're all interwoven.
Oh, they are. But in my head, I'm like, woo, product. We're on product. And the last one I've got, ensuring like financial feasibility, which we did cover.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it has to stack up. The numbers have to stack up. It has to produce the right amount of profit, or you're never going to finance it. And what's the point of that? It has to stack up. We know that. But it's finding that site. So, I mean, we have to know. I always say, know what you want to develop ahead of time. Know the type of product, know the location, know the zoning, and then obviously the right contacts in terms of real estate agents. Get to know your market so that you can design the right product. But the numbers sort of fall off the back of that, because once you know the product and the location, then you can pretty much, what do they sell for? And then you can get your numbers right. You can do your due diligence properly.
And even on that one, Bob, because often a conversation I'll have with somebody is along the lines of, how much have you got to get started with? Because that determines the product. If you've only got, let's say you've only got 200,000, well, there's
not many developments you could do with 200.
No, so say you had 700,000 or 800,000. We know that means you can build, you can make that thing in that location. We know that the GRV, we know, and then you can work backwards from there. But it's just one of the moving parts. So, Bob, in our online course, we've got a checklist for all this.
Well, we've got a checklist for due diligence, and guess what it's called?
What?
The due diligence checklist.
Oh, there you go.
So you just work your way through it, and they're the questions you need answers for.
But each of those questions has numerous answers. If we were looking at location and market demand, location has a number of things that need to be checked. Market demand has a number of things that need to be checked.
It's all broken down to sectors, but it makes it easy so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The point is this, where people go wrong is they leave things out. And they make something look better than it is by leaving things out. This way you don't.
Are we talking about in the numbers or any of those things?
In the numbers, because as you know, we teach people how to do feasibilities. We've got a feasibility calculator that makes life really easy to work these things out. But also with due diligence, things like zoning and size and all that. So you don't miss stuff. That's really important. And that's where people go wrong. They miss stuff out. I've rarely seen a feasibility wrong because somebody put too much stuff in. It's because they put not enough of the right stuff in. Or they've just got an emotion, and try and give the thing a higher sale value than it really does. Keep emotion out. We talked about that before.
Well, I think we've really covered a lot on, finding a viable development site. And there are viable ones. It's just, you've just got to know every part. I suppose it's like anything you do, any vocation, say you're in, whatever you do for a job right now, you know every moving part. And the same thing happens with property development, doesn't it?
It's pretty important because there's big numbers involved. There's a lot of money involved. Sure, you can make a lot of money when you do it right, but you don't want to do it wrong.
Don't want to do anything wrong, Bob.
No.
Especially when it comes to property development.
Well, if you're making a fruitcake and you got it wrong,
we miss out the baking
and you burned
powder.
it, or you forgot to put the fruit in. You've wasted $10 on ingredients. You don't want to get a property development wrong. You want to do it right.
So it's bigger than $10.
It's worth more than $10.
It is worth more than $10. So anyone serious about property development, we've got we're doing a few lunchtime sessions at the moment. So on the 18th of February, we've got a lunchtime session on finding a viable site, run by Bob. So it's about a 45-minute session. You're welcome to jump on that. There'll be a link below for you to jump into that if you're keen to, just jump in and see how Bob talks about it and takes you through it. But otherwise, key points, Bob, it's location, market demand, zoning, councils.
All of that. I mean, know ahead of time what you want to do.
Yep.
Understand your end product. Okay, I'm going to do a duplex know your product, know your area, your location. Okay, I'm going to do a duplex in this location. I'm going to do a 2-lot subdivision in this location. So you're narrowing it down. Then get the right zoning in that location for that. That narrows the field down a bit further. And the same thing when you find a site, you've got to do the numbers right, do the due diligence right, and do it right up front, and it'll carry you all the way.
Yeah, cool. No cutting corners. Get it done right.
Get it done right.
So, Bob, that's the end of it. Thanks for an interesting chat. Finding a viable site, unpacked, and let's catch everybody next week.
Look forward to that.
Okay, bye.
Bye.